So far today we've talked a lot about the new style of IT. I think Meg, did a great job, walking us through some of that, and Colin, took it down to the next level to talk a little bit about the what. So I think up to this point, we've heard a little bit, a lot about the what. Now, from my perspective at HP Financial Services, I think there's an opportunity, for me to talk about a little bit about how having an effective investment strategy, or how viewing IT as an investment going forward, may change the way you think about how you want to acquire IT going forward. So, with that said, we've talked a lot about the rapid pace of change. There's a lot of data out there, just how fast things are moving. We think back about the internet. The internet has only been out here, a relatively short period of time. But I don't think anyone can think about, living without it. I know my kids certainly can't, and even my 90-year-old father, who reads the sports scores and, downloads his racing form from time to time on the internet, is, it's become a part of his life. At the same time, the pace of change continues to pick up. These are data points that we've seen in every 60 seconds. If it's a Google search, if it's what's being tweeted, if it's the amount of terabytes of data that's being stored, things are happening at a pace that we've never seen before. I've been around. I've been in the industry for a while. Went through the dot-com phase. Saw what happened out of that. But I think this is inherently different. I think what we're seeing now is this is changing the way we do and our customers do business. The whole new style of IT is becoming the fabric of how businesses and how we're going to deal with our customers going forward. Think about, there's a data point out there, the Forrester study, they're looking at the Fortune 1000 from 10 years ago. Over 70% of those companies are no longer here. So I think it's incumbent upon us and you to think about ways that you have to embrace the change that's happening, but at the same time, you have to adapt. You have to adapt to the new style of IT. You have to come up with ways that you could turn it into an asset, you could leverage it, and at the same time, it's a market opportunity for you. When I think about trends, the level of spending on IT continues. It's exceeding our gross national product. So there's a tremendous amount of IT spend. And at HP Financial Services, as I said before, one of the things we try to do is to get our customers to think about it a little bit differently. Historically, everybody has viewed IT as a commodity. It's a nice to have, it's a have to have, it's something I want to put in my data center. And those decisions were historically made by CIOs. There were a couple of points today, and I think Tom brought them up, and I think the gentleman who asked the question about how do I justify or how do I get buy-in around a Vertica rollout. At the end of the day, I think what we're trying to see or what we're trying to position is those investments have to be tied to business outcomes. And you need the sponsorship internally, you need to get everybody on board, and you need to start looking at things a little bit differently. IT is not just a here and now. IT is something that I think that you're going to leverage. And again, businesses are built around it. Market dynamics. Things are, as I said, the rapid pace of change. The interesting thing too is when you look at who's making those IT decisions, those buy decisions, it's not the traditional CIO anymore. In many cases, probably you're seeing a lot of IT decisions being made by the marketing organization. Why? Because they're closest to the data, they're closest to their customers, and they see an opportunity to turn this into something that's going to help them grow the business. At the same time, people, we want to see IT, we want to be flexible. If I go back to the times or my numerous customer visits, it's a common theme. Everybody's talking about flexibility, everybody's talking about being nimble, everybody's talking about being in a position to take advantage of something coming down the road. If you go back and you look at, there was a Forrester study a while ago, I think 2 years ago, about what is one of the biggest burdens or obstacles in companies moving to a cloud-based solution. What it was their legacy IT platforms. They were tied to legacy IT, it was an ownership model that they were tied to, that they had to deal with, and it prevented them from being flexible and nimble and to take advantage of the next wave. If it's a public cloud or a private cloud, I don't think it's going to be a 100% solution for anybody, but I think one of the things that we keep trying to pitch is we want you to be in a position to be flexible. One of my best salesmen, in working with one of our large customers, he came up with an idea. He goes, why do you want to own the uncertainty? Why do you want to own an asset? Why do you want to put capital into an asset, that's going to be tied down, it's going to become a boat anchor for 5 years? Because you don't know where you're going to be 3 years from now. Wouldn't you rather be in a position that gives you some flexibility and enables you to make a different decision down the road? And as I said before, what we're trying to do, is to get our customers to think about, the way IT is acquired and consumed a little bit differently. We hear a lot about consumption models. People, you want to pay for what you use, when you use it, and where you use it. I think there's opportunities to do that. Usage-based. I go way back to the copier industry. The copier industry was on the forefront. Cost per copy. 20 years ago, that's how copy machines were sold. You only paid for the number of pages you printed or the supplies you used. IT, we're seeing it's moving in the same direction. No one wants to commit the legacy infrastructure. Everybody wants to be nimble and flexible going forward. As I said before, one of the things that we've seen in working with our customers, we're trying to change the conversation. We're trying to move the conversation up the channel or up the chain and have a meaningful discussion at the CIO and CFO level. We want to turn it into a solution-based conversation. And again, Thomas alluded to it earlier this morning. There's no, at the end of the day, it's not an IT project. It's a business project. And what is that project? Is it revenue producing? Is it going to gain market share? Is it going to enable operational efficiencies? And you got to get the buy-in and the sponsorship, not just from the IT department, but you got to do it in partnership with the rest of the business. And it does two things. Number one, it ties you to an outcome or business outcome. And the other thing it does, it gets their buy-in and it accelerates the pace of change. If people are bought in and they see it, and they see the outcome and it's driving a favorable business outcome, it's a much easier story to tell to get them to change. It's not as disruptive. Mentally they're bought in and it's something they can move to. As I said, I hosted a panel when I was in Vegas, and it was attended largely by CIOs, but what we talked about is the changing language of the CFO, of the CIO. How can a CIO, position their projects and talk to a CFO to get things moving forward? And the common theme was align around business goals. Align around, specific outcomes that are going to drive something favorable for the business. And get the organization behind that. If it's, as I said, if it's revenue producing, if it's data security, there's something out there that there's an opportunity to tie this to. And you'd be surprised, in customers that we've talked to, just how much easier it is to have that conversation. So from my perspective in Vegas to the CIOs, it was all about everybody's got budget challenges, everybody's got less dollars to spend. So how can you more effectively speak the language of the CFO and get your project to move forward? And you'd be surprised, just how good or how favorable the reaction was. And we had a bunch of people come up afterwards. And most of my background is in finance. I was the CFO for HP Financial Services up till about 6 years ago. And I was telling Tom earlier that the most effective relationships I had with the CIO was the one who I really could view as a business partner. Those were the ones who really helped drive the change, and those were the ones that really understood not just what they were trying to do to solve an IT problem, but what was the IT problem translating into a business outcome. The new style of IT, again, think about it as an investment. Think about, what am I doing? I need to do this project and view IT as something that's going to get me from where I am today to where I want to go down the road. As a background from my, in the CFO days, it was much easier to have that conversation if you made it real and if you made it, relevant in terms of how is it really going to drive and help me become more effective as a CFO, you'd be surprised how, how quickly you get things on board. And I guess the other thing too is, as I said, what we're trying to, position is flexibility. With the rapid pace of change, organizations should be in a position where they remain or maintain as much flexibility as possible. I mentioned before, about the Forrester study that said, okay, that one of the biggest obstacles to go, from where you are today to the cloud was your legacy IT infrastructure. There's ways to avoid that. And again, I talk about, from our perspective, it's not just about financing, it's not just about leasing. Really what we're trying to drive is the whole acquisition strategy. Well, how can we help you acquire assets? How can we help you better manage them, more effectively deploy them? And, at the end of the day, bring a little bit more discipline into the system when it comes to, how they're handled at end of lease. And, one of our biggest competitors is cash, right, at the end of the day. But one of the other biggest obstacles we have to overcome in talking to CIOs and customers is some of the prior practices they may have dealt with third-party leasing companies. And from our perspective, being a captive and being part of HP, we're much more friendly and much more focused on not the here and now and what we do, but really helping you or helping the product group position the relationship and really making sure things are done the right way so we're in line to do the next sale with the customer. And again, at the end of the day, Mega's been one of our biggest sponsors. With things moving as fast as they are, there is an opportunity for us to get involved earlier and really have a positive outcome on those transactions. When we look at, the discipline that a financing strategy can bring into an organization, what we're seeing is a lot more projects are a lot more successful if there's an opportunity to tie some kind of a financing strategy to it. As I said, it helps you manage the timing, it helps you provide some flexibility, and it helps you, make decisions along the road as opposed to an upfront commitment of capital. The other thing is capital is continued to be tight, and what we try to position is why use your legacy capital for acquiring an asset that you may not know what you're going to do with 2 to 3 years down the road. That capital should be preserved for more strategic investments, if it's hiring the right employee, if it's doing an acquisition, if it's doing something else that's going to help move the business forward. Why do you want that capital tied up in legacy assets? That, at the end of the day, you don't know what you're going to do with 2 or 3 years from now. We've had, as I said, when we talk to our customers, one of the things that we try to focus on, it's really a life cycle approach. We get them to think about what their environment looks like today, but more importantly, where do you think you need to be over the next 2 to 3 years? Our philosophy is to help you manage your assets and provide a solution from cradle to the grave, from acquisition to retirement. We handle over 2 million assets in the secondary market. In many cases, the first interaction we have with our customers is not necessarily about a new financing arrangement. It could be going into a data center or to a desktop environment, buying assets back, disposing of them to help either create value or to just create additional space in a data center where you can deploy a new solution. We are very focused over the life of the deal, over the life of the technology. We work very closely with the product groups. We try to look for opportunities to upgrade, to switch, to the next level of technology without having the lease or the financing structure becoming a burden. And as I said before, being a captive, our reason to be is to enable the next HP sale. I mean, we generate our revenues around the world is probably about $4.5 billion. We're kind of hanging in there with software, but that's going to change. At the end of the day, what we do from a financing standpoint or what we do from a revenue standpoint is not necessarily strategic to HP, but what we do in helping HP position a solution, and our partners position a solution with their customers, that's what really moves the needle. And as I said before, more and more the discussions are turning to situations where we can help leverage that existing technology, come up with a solution to really drive a positive business outcome. And that's what we've been pushing with our guys. We've spent a lot of time training them so they can have the conversation with CIOs, they can have the conversation with top partners, have the conversation with CFOs, and really look for opportunities where we can have a positive impact. And at the end of the day, as I said before, a financing strategy doesn't have to be an all or nothing. I think there's an opportunity to have a blend. You can deploy financing, you can deploy an ownership model, but at the end of the day, what it's really focused on is giving you that flexibility, and so you can become nimble to take advantage of opportunities that may come down the road. We've had some success with customers. These are just a handful, but the ones that have been the most successful are the ones that really embrace what we can bring to the table and the solutions that that we can develop jointly with the product group. I can't say flexibility enough, but at the end of the day, I think many of you are going through major transformations, or your customer are going through transformations, and there's probably an opportunity to get them to think about how they're dealing with IT a little bit differently. And again, I keep going back to the comments that Thomas made this morning. Is really, when it's most effective, you're tying those conversations to a positive business outcome. And, it does not become the burden of the CIO, it does not become the burden of the IT group to get things through the process. It really is tied to a business outcome. And I mentioned before that, we're seeing it's not the IT leaders who are acquiring assets anymore. It could be the marketing department, it could be HR, and CIO's got to maintain that partnership with their business leader to enable to continue to drive it in the right direction. So we talked a lot about the what, the new style of IT. Hopefully what I was able to do, give you a little bit of a perspective on just how you can think about it a little bit differently, and how deploying some of our strategies may help you in the conversations you're having with your internal customers as well as some of your partners, and how it may help you become a little bit more successful down the road in leveraging and taking advantage of the technologies that's out there, and really driving into a favorable business outcome. So I'm short. And now I'll open it up for questions now. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to take them. John.
So a lot of the people here are obviously more on the IT side. This is not a group of CFOs, but more CIOs, directors, VPs of technology. So if you could counsel and maybe give some examples of how you've seen it in different companies. I mean, traditionally, these people will go and get budgets. Usually these are CapEx budgets. And Thomas said something about maybe not the word budget, but intensity of the investment. But how would you maybe change that from an IT side of things, even in terms of like setting up budgets with finance? How would you say they should maybe change some of the communication? Because it does seem like most of our customers, hey, you get budgets and you have to work within that. And secondly, when a project comes up, if there is a financial discussion, it's the CFO will take care of that at the time we're almost ready to make the deal. How would you maybe change that, or what would you suggest maybe change?
Well, I think I'd go back to something that that Tom said this morning. At the end of the day, I think number one, it's got to be a partnership with the CIO and the CFO. Number two, I think the budgets. At the end of the day, it's always going to be a discussion about what do I have available to spend. But I think the most effective conversations are taking those projects and aligning it with where the business is going. Where do I see, where does the CFO or where does management want to take the business 2 or 3 years down the road? And how do I align effectively, or how do I enable to make that happen? And I think then what you're doing is you're getting buy-in from the CFO and the rest of the management team, and they become sponsors or advocates for what IT is trying to do. The technology discussion about what's the right platform or how we're going to do it, that's always going to fall in the backyard of the CIO. But I think just how to position the conversation and how to spin it a little bit differently, that it's not a cost center. I'm not just acquiring IT and it's going to become a financial burden for you going forward. If I do this, we buy this, we move forward, we upgrade this platform, number one, it makes me more nimble in terms of operating efficiencies, or number two, it helps expand my reach into a new market, and it turns into a revenue opportunity going down the road. Tom?
But I also think it's, like you said earlier, understanding the language of the business. So understanding the language of the CFO is actually critical. When I stopped showing, added to showing my budget versus actual, which is necessary in inspection, and started showing cash flow analysis, he got a clearer picture of what we were doing in IT. And he then believed I understood IT as a business. And was a business unit leader, which happened to be IT.
Mm-hmm.
And credibility really jumped.
Right, and a great point. Finding something that resonates with the CFO. And again, if you're that project or whatever it is enables them to do things more efficiently. Maybe it's manage headcount a little bit differently, but it translates into dollars, into cash flow. I think that's the way to position it. My game has always been to find someone to be my advocate, right? At the end of the day, we know what we're capable of doing, but if someone in that room is supporting your idea and can move it forward, and it becomes important to them, it's going to move it forward. And I think you got to find a way to have that conversation with the CFO. I think there was somebody who made a comment about ROI and going back and do we inspect? I mean, I used to inspect. At the end of the day, you'd set expectations, but maybe you didn't do a good job on what was the consequence? Do you give them less budget next year? I don't think so. I think at the end of the day, I think what we always tried to do was to align that spend to an efficiency number or factor. We're driving heads. We're introducing a new tool to do credit scoring more efficiently, and I don't need credit analysts. And we would go back and make sure that we moved in that direction. Yes.
Let me preface this that I am not a CIO, and I may get myself in trouble with the CIOs in the group here, but there have been at least 3 times in the last 10 years of my career where there's been a kind of a nexus point where you make a decision between what I would call a fixed cost model of IT and a variable cost model of IT, more aligned with what your investment strategies are talking about. And every time the fixed cost one wins, and I build a new server room. So, and my feeling each time of that is that there's a built-in bias towards owning rather than variable. You see that changing, in the last decade?
I do, and I think one of the challenges, who is it? Was Ron made the comment today about some of the conversations that he has with members of the school board. The gentleman who sits at home with the 12-year-old PC and says, "Oh, I can do everything I need." Maybe the right answer, but at the end of the day, there's hidden costs, and maybe it works for an individual, but from an organization standpoint, if you have older equipment, older hardware, there's a real cost to it. You've got the 4th-year maintenance, you've got downtime, you've got non-standard platforms within the same data center. And I think more and more, I think people are seeing being a willingness to be a little bit more flexible, to shorten the life cycles. And number one, it's cheaper. And number two, it positions them to take advantage of something that may be coming down the pipe. And the other thing too is one of the obstacles, as I said before, that we see on our side is it's easier to own. It's easier just to put it out there and let it sit in a data center and not worry about it. But at the same time, there's opportunity cost. I think you're losing the opportunity, the flexibility, and introducing, just being tied to that legacy asset. So I do think it's changing. But again, I think we got to keep pushing. Where do you want to be tomorrow? How fast is the curve moving? And do you really want to get tied, to a commitment of old assets? And we have seen, companies move, be more willing to adopt that. Anybody else? Yes.
Why is it easier to own than finance? I mean, why?
Easier.
What is your perception that it's easier to own to buy than?
Number one, you pay for it all up front. You don't have to worry about making a monthly payment. Number two, it's the cash flow is at one time as opposed to seeing cash go out each month. It may be a little bit more of a challenge to administer. You've got to have accounts payable in the background to manage the process. And I think last but not least, I think there's always concern what happens on the financing side at end of lease. I think a lot of third-party leasing companies made a lot of money, taking advantage of their customers. Customers got hit a little bit hard with end of lease charges to buy the asset at the end of the term, and in some cases that was maybe more expensive than just paying for it up front. But what we try to see on our side is, we would prefer transactions not to go full term. We would prefer to interrupt early and then find an opportunity that works for the customer to take the asset back and introduce a newer version of the same technology. And the other reason it's easy is because easier to own is I don't think companies do a good job in really costing out just how much it costs to handle a 5-year asset. I mean, they think they're not paying anything in depreciation expense, but no one's tracking the maintenance, no one's tracking the downtime, no one's tracking, if you have to go into the data center and switch it out, because it's 4 or 5 years old and it should have been replaced 2 years ago. Yeah. So it's discipline. Anybody else? Yes.
Hi. Not so much of a question, but we're customers of HP Finance, and we used the finance arm when we were going through our cloud build-out. It was going back to Meg's comment, it was the Amazon, and then the cost started to mount up every month on Amazon. We finally got to a point where the costs were so prohibitive, looking at buying our own data center and financing it with the residual value, our cost was 50% less to build our own than to buy from Amazon, so for whatever that's worth to the audience.
It's a good commercial.
You can buy me a beer later.
I'll do that. I got to get to the airport by 10 o'clock. But anyway, but yeah, I think it was a good point about Amazon. I know Amazon is a near-term solution. I think I think Meg said it. It's a consumer model, right? They want you to buy, sign up, and that's it, and never deal with them again. But I think we've had a couple of customers that we've worked with that have transitioned off Amazon, and now they want to own, and they want to have more control of the assets in their data center. And sometimes it's a case where companies may be a little bit concerned. The more they go, the more they grow. I may need to want to have a little bit more control over my data, and I might not want it in an Amazon environment. I might want to have it in something that I'm a little bit more comfortable with. But again, I think your experience sounds like it's a good one, and hopefully that plays out. But again, why pay 100% or $100 when you could buy something for 75 cents and deal with it over time?
So there was a time in the past where I would have been one of those customers seeking buyout at the end. Today with virtualization, I don't need to care as much. I've got the flexibility to either let the hardware run for 6 years, and as it dies, I put new hardware in. Have you guys seen a shift in how many people, and I don't know what the averages were, of people who would just trade up for new technology versus scramble to buy, but have you seen any sort of impact on the number of people who are keeping that hardware?
I think what we're seeing is, and again, as I said before, historically leasing companies used to make a lot of money at end of lease. I mean, that's where their returns were the highest, and they were betting that it would never come out. The asset would never come back. But I think what we're seeing is, and what we pitch is, we could bring a little bit more discipline into the data center. We could put you on a 3-year refresh and avoid that 4th and 5th year maintenance. So we're actually seeing more assets coming back. More assets being returned because people have kind of bought into what we were pitching on the front end. And from our perspective, that may it creates an opportunity for us because there is an opportunity in the secondary market. We handle, as I said, well over 2 million units in the secondary market. So there's an opportunity to, you know, to either break the units down for parts or to deploy them in, and send them to another partner.
Part of the reason why I stuck around after the leasing is in the old days when we saw on guaranteed units.
Right.
Worked like Cameron, it's more likely to be able to create units at return. It didn't go here in the old days.
But there was a lot of money made leasing mainframes. A lot of money made leasing and upgrading mainframes over time. But yeah. Any other questions? Okay, I will be around for a while, and thanks. It's my pleasure to be here, and hopefully this was informative for you. Thank you.